Hello, good evening. I am here this evening with Belinda Jonak, who is an Arkansas Master Naturalist. And Master Naturalists are described as volunteer educators, citizen scientists, and stewards of the environment striving to protect and preserve Arkansas's natural beauty. She's also kind of a unique guest here because she's also my former coworker. She used to work here at the Garland County Library, and she was well loved for her own love of animals and all of her knowledge. So she's here to present that tonight to you. Tonight's program is called Stranger Danger. That's Belinda's name, not mine, but it's about potentially dangerous or harmful local organisms and how we can respect them and coexist safely. So welcome, Belinda, and I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, and yeah, the title, okay, the actual title that I started out with was Nature's Untouchables, and it needed a little more explanation. And when I told them what I was trying to do, Stranger Danger came up, and it was catchy. So, and once you know something about a plant or animal, it is less of a stranger and a little less dangerous if you know what to expect, who they are. And that's what I'm aiming towards more, is how to identify, how to recognize some of our local plants, flora and fauna. I selected some things as kind of representative or common things that you might run into if you're out and about in Arkansas. Okay, so let's go here. And Nature's Untouchables. Is this?
Oh, it's up. You're good.
Okay. So let me go to, okay.
You can just hit enter or the arrow key if you want to go to your next slide.
All right, got it. The selected examples, I mean, almost everybody's run into poison ivy. Caterpillars, we'll go into a little more detail about that. A few of the examples of spiders, stinging insects, and I'm going to do snakes too. Okay, we have some statistics. These are not brand new statistics, but roughly speaking, your chance of being harmed by a plant or an animal are pretty slim, especially in this part of the world. We don't really, I mean, it's not like Australia where there are a lot of things that could kill you. And the most common ways that people actually are hurt or killed come from things like hitting a deer. The numbers on people being in accidents involving large animals, especially deer, are the highest of anything. So, and the next most common risk of fatality is going to be if you're sensitive to an insect. A lot of people have allergies to bees and wasps, and there are fatalities from people running into a hornet's nest, being sensitive. You get a large number of stings. It's dangerous. And domestics, which I'm not dealing with, dogs, cattle, horses, you're much more likely to get in trouble with a domestic animal than you are with something in the wild. And they were looking at by state. In Arkansas, you're a lot more likely to have an encounter with a deer on the road than you are anything else. And I am looking at some of the toxic plants as well, and this information came largely from the Northwest, but we have all of these things in Arkansas. So I'm going to discuss some of those plants that are potentially fatal. Okay, and these don't fall under the plant category. Mushrooms are a thing unto themselves. And I like this old saying, there are old mushroom hunters, there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old bold mushroom hunters. You take too many chances with mushrooms and you may pay a price, a severe one. Okay, so in Arkansas, we do have death caps, we do have destroying angels, and those are in the genus Amanita, or Amanita. And those are really serious. Now, most people who are foragers stick with the safe ones, but there are some experts who take some risks. And if you're going to forage for mushrooms, you need to be really, really careful. Some of the characters that you're going to look at would be the gills, the universal veil. There are some characteristics that will tell you that these are in the genus Amanita. And this Muscaria, the fly agaric, or agaric, and the destroying angel and the death cap are all in the same genus, and they're all poisonous. Okay, now, foragers. We've had a few people that were ill as a result of making mistakes on morels. Those are considered a choice edible. If you get a false morel, probably won't kill you, but it would make you sick, and they are here. Now, jack-o'-lanterns are really common, and there are a few people who really like chanterelles. Chanterelles are a similar color. The structure is really different, but if you find them occurring together, there is a risk that you could get the wrong one. So you need to be careful if you're foraging for mushrooms, which one you get. Now, death cap, the white mushrooms with the veil, that white sac, the ring under the gill cap, that will tell you you've got a potentially deadly mushroom. Death caps and destroying angels, plain white. They've got the sac around the bottom, partial veil. Anything that looks similar to this, definitely leave it alone. Okay. So I'm just hitting the high points on these. Mushrooms, that's for specialty people. Those are for experts. There are a few that are safe, but you need to really study before you forage for mushrooms. Okay. Probably everyone knows poison ivy. I liked these rhymes. They gave some clues on different stages of poison ivy, but leaves of 3, let it be. Now, when they get big and they go up trees, they get kind of ropey and hairy looking. Those can have the same effect. Now, some people are not sensitive to the chemical in poison ivy at all. Deer can browse it. Birds can eat the berries. And if you see it in berry, when it has fruit, they're white, and yeah, if you're sensitive to poison ivy, leave it alone. Berries white, run in fright. There are a couple of other plants that are that have white berries, but yeah, white berries, generally leave those alone. when they're first coming in, the leaves come in red in the spring. And they look a little, that little thumb-shaped edge is not on all the leaves, but some people describe them as mitten-shaped. Side leaflets like the mittens, will itch like the dickens. That's kind of cute. But there are a lot of vines that grow with them. Virginia creeper and poison ivy a lot of times will be growing together. So you want to look carefully. If it's got three leaves, let it be. It's an alternate plant. When you've got three leaves side by side, it's not poison ivy. But that might be a little bit subtle. Now, what I've heard of when people are like clearing an area and they burn like brush that has poison ivy in it, if you're sensitive to it, that can make you really sick too. So when you're clearing brush, be aware, be careful. If you know you're sensitive to it, you might want to take extra precautions if you're going to burn brush. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Now, I like nettles. We have a wood nettle here. When it's really young, it doesn't really sting, and you eat them. They make a good spinach substitute. I'm a forager, so if you like to go out and look at plants and use the safe ones, if you take precautions with a big or an adult, a grown wood nettle, because you need gloves to handle those. But once you cook them, they're fine. They taste good. When you blow them up, when you expand the picture, those fuzzy hairs are really sharp pointed, and the chemicals they have in them are irritating. So yeah, they can raise a bit of a welt. You'll know if you get into them bare skinned. We had a discussion about whether this was actually a venomous plant, because ordinarily venom is associated with animals and poison with plants. But since the nettles can inject poison, it's technically a venomous plant. But these are quite tasty. Okay. We have all of these, and all of these are fairly hazardous in one way or another. Water hemlock, you'd have to actually eat some of these, but the sap on wild parsnip, a lot of the plants in the carrot family, if you get the sap on you and you're like out in a well-lit area, it makes it even worse. You can have a pretty severe rash from the sap of any of these. And there have been some fatalities because wild parsnip is edible, but if it's growing in with something like poison ivy, poison hemlock, you can get in trouble. The roots of the parsnip and the roots of the hemlock are not that different. But when you're clearing an area and you see these rather lacy leaves, and if these are mature plants, especially the hemlock will have these purple streaks on the stems, lacy leaves, purple streaks on the stem, flat umbrella-shaped flowers. Be very cautious. You want to wear probably goggles, especially if you're weed eating. You don't want to get the sap on you. Goggles, long sleeves, gloves, definitely. And if you're a forager, you better be really careful with members of the carrot family. These the ones with the flat umbrella-shaped flowers. quite a few of them are toxic. Okay, so we have water hemlock here. The leaves aren't quite as lacy as the poison hemlock, but they all have these clumped, vaguely umbrella-shaped flowers. And if you're a forager, you want to leave that one alone. Now, this is an import from Europe. It gets huge. You can see the kids in the photo standing next to, but they get really tall, and the sap on these will give you blisters. It is very irritating. There's not that much here in this part of Arkansas, but up north, there have been some that have escaped, and they're growing wild. Okay, this is another import, but it does have those lacy leaves and the clumped small flowers, vaguely umbrella shaped. And Queen Anne's lace, which sometimes they get confused with, which actually is, Queen Anne's lace is in this same family, the carrot family. But when you harvest Queen Anne's lace, which is really wild carrot, it will have a distinctly carroty smell to it. And poison hemlock does not. We also have a native plant. It grows wild here. If you see it in fruit, again, white berries, those are toxic to humans anyway. And monkshood, wolfsbane, same plant. You probably only see these in people's gardens. Now, I made some selections about garden plants. There is a native monkshood that was used by the natives in the area up north, that was used as a poison for hunting whales. So it's pretty potent stuff, and it's been involved in some poisoning cases in Europe. So we do have one in the US, but anything that you find here is likely an escaped garden plant. And it has been used medicinally as well, but it's kind of hazardous to use. You have to know what you're doing. This one is another native, a false hellebore. It looks a lot like a lily plant. The flowers aren't really all that showy though. Pale green, a pretty common garden plant, but it is a wildflower. It occurs out in the woods. It's a little more common in northern counties. Okay, so some terminology. I've heard people say poisonous snake. Well, technically speaking, if it's injected toxins, it's a venom. It's venomous. If it bites you, it's venomous. If you eat it, it's poisonous. So ordinarily, poison is ingested. You have to have it by mouth. Venom, you have to have a mechanism. We were discussing the thing about the spines on the excuse me. So plant spines that are on the wood nettle or on the nettles, that inject poison, that would be an exception, because generally speaking, it's poisonous plants. Now, something can be poisonous and venomous, but that's pretty rare. Okay. And there are insects that can bite at the mouth end, sting at the other end, and it's only the females that can sting. And quite a few animals, especially the insects, will give you plenty of warning just by the way they're colored. Sometimes these colors are false advertising, but mostly if it's bright, contrasting colors, especially red, especially orange or yellow, orange and yellow and black colors together, suspect that it's armed and dangerous. They may sting, they may bite, but aposematic is the technical term for it. Warning coloration is the more casual term. But those bright patterns, heads up, it may be armed. Okay, not everybody realizes that fuzzy little caterpillars can be hazardous. There are a few of them, not all of them, because I've played with caterpillars a lot when I was a kid. I've only gotten, really zapped by this one, the saddleback. I think it may be a little more common in this area. The graphic I got from Pennsylvania, I mean, we have them all here, but some are a little more common than others. Seen buck moth, the saddleback definitely, and tussock caterpillars. Fuzzy doesn't necessarily mean venomous, but it's certainly possible. But these are the usual suspects. So the ones in Arkansas that you might run into, and they hurt, the puss moth, the Io moth, saddleback, buck moth, all of these grow up to be moths. Now, after they undergo metamorphosis, they're harmless. They no longer sting. But as caterpillars, they can hurt. And some people have a really bad reaction to them. They mostly hang out on the leaves of their host trees, but sometimes they do wander around, especially if you have a big outbreak. And I've seen these here also. Blister beetles are not that uncommon. You would have to actually pick one up when they're really annoyed, when they think they're in danger. Well, handle them, and they will defensively let go with this reddish stuff, cantharidin, and they can raise blisters. There have been occasional problems with livestock eating plants that have these beetles in them or on them. Okay, this guy is really interesting. Justin Schmidt is an entomologist. I think he's in one of the western states. But he works with stinging insects a lot. And he had been stung by practically all of them. And I think he actually let some of them sting him just for the experience. But he made this, it's sort of like those, we were talking about people who eat really hot chilies. Well, there are also people who deliberately get stung, and he's one of them. And he's rating how bad the sting was. But the descriptions are really funny. So something like a sweat bee or a fire ant, light, ephemeral, almost fruity, tiny spark has singed a single hair on your arm. He's nuts. But a level 4 one, we actually do have a tarantula hawk here. They don't really, you have to really bother them. I mean, really get physical with them to get them to sting you. So, but blinding, fierce, shockingly electric. A running hairdryer has just been dropped into your bubble bath. He's nuts. The absolute worst one is a bullet ant, which we do not have here. But we have fire ants, we have sweat bees, honeybees, paper wasps, and torrential hawk wasps. But this is his rating scale, and he's got how bad it is and how long the pain lasts. Now, we've got fire ants, and I was talking about the difference between biting and stinging. Well, an ant will do both. It will hang on with its jaws and sting simultaneously. And these things, a bunch of them together, and they're very aggressive. If you've run into a fire ant mountain, you know that. But this is what they look like. There are a whole bunch of different ants. Some of them hang out in small groups, but because fire ants, they occur in large numbers, they're easily disturbed. So yeah, you can get really hurt if you land in a fire ant mound. Okay, so all of the hymenopterans, well, that's the technical name for the group that includes bees, wasps, ants. And they can all sting, and only the females can sting. Trouble is, you mostly see females because the social insects consist largely of mostly females with a few males. But the males can't sting at all, if you can tell which ones they are. But bees, they're fuzzy. You can annoy them to the point when they will sting. Wasps, they're touchy and they're territorial. And sometimes if you disturb their nest, you can get a whole bunch of them land on you at once, and it's not fun. But we have all these honeybees, bumblebees, yellow jackets, paper wasp, bald-faced hornet. Now, I would not want to run into those. They pack a punch too. Okay, the ephemeral sting. We have sweat bees. They're tiny, they're rather pretty. Some of them are shiny metallic, and they are attracted to sweat. They like the salts and minerals in sweat. Not much to worry about, but they can sting, itty bitty stings. Now, most people have heard about bees being only able to sting once, and it usually is true because they've got a barbed stinger, and when it injects, it hangs in thick skin. Usually if the bee stings something soft body like a spider, it can go again. But if the stinger gets hung in the skin, it pulls out some of the internal parts and they die. Okay, and knowing where they are is a good way to avoid them. Now, most people have seen paper wasps, and they make the paper nests. The yellow jackets tend to be ground nesting. That's the ones that people will run over with a lawnmower and not know it, and you get swarmed, not fun. And the bald-faced hornets make those huge paper nests. Now, I've never actually been, mud daubers are pretty hard to annoy. They hang around and they can sting, but they usually don't. And I like this particular sort of mud dauber because they make pots. And this is called a potter's wasp. And the containers they make, to reproduce. And what they've done is they'll get spiders, other small insects, sting them, paralyze them, stock the little clay containers, and then lay eggs in them. And that's how their younger cared for. But comparatively speaking, you've got a yellow jacket, pretty slick, bumblebee fuzzy, honeybee fuzzy, bald-faced hornet slick, large. This was an interesting nest. It was built in an apple tree, but they can get really large. Okay, mimicry. We're talking about aposematic warning coloration, the yellow and black. Those colors together occur in actual stinging insects, but there are other insects that mimic. They'll have those same patterns, but they can't sting, false advertising. So this is called Batesian mimicry. Okay, so you've got a hoverfly, which can't sting. They mostly hang out in the same area as bees do, but they have no way to defend themselves. But the wasp, with a similar pattern, obviously can sting, and the bees also with the yellowish and dark stripes. They are also armed, but we have many different mimics. So that's the actual wasp. And then you have fly, the wraparound eyes, short antenna, fly, fly, fly. That's an unusual one though. And a beetle. There's even a moth that looks somewhat like a hornet. There's the same beetle again, and a hoverfly that can't sting at all. And they're all imitating the patterns, the black and light colored or yellowish bands that occur on the stinging insects. And some of them come pretty close, and others, not so much. Okay, and this was the one that was pretty high up on the Schmidt pain index. I've seen these fairly frequently. They're a wingless wasp. The common name is velvet ant, but they are the females are wingless wasps. If you actually try to mess with them, they can be made to sting, and it's a bad sting, because the common name, another common name, which is an exaggeration, you would have to have a bunch of them and they don't swarm, is cow killer, because it hurts so bad. And in this case, you can actually tell if it's a male, which cannot sting, but if it's got wings, it's a guy and it can't sting. And these are just really neat wasps. Talking about warning coloration, they've got blue, black, orange. They're really bright colored, really big wasps. But what they do is hunt for spiders, and they're called tarantulas, tarantula hawks. They go for big spiders. They will sting, paralyze the spider, bury it, lay an egg on it, and that's the way they raise their young. And this one has a real high pain index rate. This guy does like wildlife, Coyote Peterson. You can see his finger there, but you can see how large the wasp is, but you have to force it to sting. They're very single-minded, and they're after spiders. They're not after anything else. Okay, I remember a personal story. My mother thought she was going to be nice and rescue an insect. She picked it up to put it outside, and it was an assassin bug, aka a wheeled bug. And they don't go after people deliberately, but they do have a stabbing, a piercing, sucking mouth part that they use to hunt other insects, and they hurt. So yeah, she got zapped. But this one has a puss moth caterpillar and has preyed on it. So the chemical defense that would work on probably a mammal, in this case, doesn't deter the wheel bug. But the wheel bug, they belong to the assassin bug group, and they are active hunters. They're actually pretty handy to have around a garden if you want them to take care of other insects, because they are pretty good predators. But they can defend themselves very well. But the hemiptera includes some of the other bad bugs, the bed bug, the kissing bug, cone nose bug, which are kind of pests. Well, they eat pests, actually. Some of these guys do, the wheel bug. But yeah, some of these are human pests, as in they bite people. They're bloodsuckers. The kissing bug and the bed bug. But the cicada, they're okay. We're about to have a big hatch of cicadas. We're going to be, hearing them in the not too distant future. Okay, flies. Deer flies and horse flies. Okay, they have like a blade for a mouth part. They actually cut, stab, they hurt. They are livestock pests, and they will bite humans, obviously. There are a few flies that are just really annoying. And probably the worst insect as far as causing harm is concerned is going to be the mosquito. I didn't really deal with parasites per se, but I did want to discuss a little bit about some of the flies. Okay, I'm seeing quite a lot of these right now. Crane flies, they look like huge mosquitoes. They can't, they won't, they don't bite. They're totally harmless. But some of these other guys are not. Now, I've heard these called buffalo gnats, and in places they will emerge all at once and they swarm, and they can be, kill baby birds kind of thing, and sometimes do damage to livestock because they occur in such numbers, and they are blood suckers, and they hurt. Horse and deer flies, and let's see, but yeah, they're largish and pretty easy to tell apart. The eyes are kind of cool. I was going to talk about the other, no-see-ums. There's some little tiny midges that bite, and some people use the term midge or gnat interchangeably. But they can raise little spots too, but you can just barely see them. They're so small. Okay, so we're moving out of insects. Arkansas only has one species of scorpion, the striped bark scorpion. You can count the legs, definitely not an insect. It has 8 legs. These close-up pictures are kind of neat too. And she does, when she has young, she carries them around on her back. And I have actually been stung by one of these, and it's no worse than a wasp sting. It hurts, but it's no big deal. It's not like some of the African and South American scorpions. Well, we've got some Western ones that are pretty bad too in terms of the venom being toxic. But all we have is this one. They're smallish, and they can definitely sting, but not really a serious threat. And these are kind of cool to find too. You see these outside and occasionally like under sinks in the house, and it's called a house centipede. They're not terribly aggressive, but both these centipedes, some people call them 100-leggers, but they're not quite 100 legs. They have a lot of legs. They also have fangs. They are venomous. They can bite, but it's not a serious bite, generally speaking. Unless you're allergic, it's not going to be any worse than a wasp or bee. And some people get these two mixed up, but millipedes have no biting mouth parts. They can't really do you any damage. Okay, this was a photograph I took a while back, and they have a defense posture where they curl up. And I found some dogwood berries and just put them on top of the millipede. If you handle them, wash thoroughly. They will, if disturbed, if they're handled, they can give off like a poisonous secretion, which does have cyanide in it. But as long as you wash your hands, you'll be fine. They can't bite. Okay, these are pretty common in Arkansas also. Black widows, they're pretty reclusive though. Usually find them in areas that are attics and like underground basements. They have a really messy, stringy web, shiny black. It's kind of hard to miss. There's more than one species of widow spider, but the black widows are pretty common, and you really can't mix them up with anything else. This is just showing the egg sac and the contrast between the male and female. The males are much smaller. And the black widow story, I mean, if he's careless, yeah, he can be eaten. But it doesn't necessarily happen all the time. He can hang out if he's careful. Usually not fatal. And they are, like all spiders, predators. They eat other insects. Well, they eat insects. They're not insects. Okay. There are lots of stories about brown recluses being horrible, terrible spiders. Some people have had bad reactions to them, but that's actually fairly rare. They're not really a big spider. They can vary in color from fairly light to fairly dark, shades of brown. They're not fuzzy like a tarantula, and tarantulas really aren't that dangerous. They're no more dangerous than getting stung by a bee, less so probably. These have a fairly potent venom, but they're very shy. They have a similar web to the black widow, messy. And they hide. It's usually an accident when somebody puts on a shoe and that they hadn't worn for a while, and it's got a spider in it. The one time I got stung by the scorpion was was camping and didn't shake out my clothes. So it's that sort of thing. You've got something that's put aside where they are, and they're hiding in it. It's an accident. But yeah, 6 eyes, which you'd have to really get close to see or have a dead one. They don't have a pattern on them. Okay, wolf spiders, a lot of the fuzzier spiders may have a pattern on them, but these are just plain. The only pattern they've got, and some people call them a fiddleback, and you can see why. They do have that vaguely violin-shaped marking on the cephalothorax. Okay, so we're moving up to animals with backbones. I don't know how many fish people know that catfish actually are mildly venomous. there is a venom gland associated with the fins, and those fins lock in position, and they are sharp. And catfish are slick as anything too. You have to handle them very carefully, but they are well armed with sharp, spiny dorsal and pectoral back and side fins. But generally speaking, even if you do get zapped, there's local swelling, and you just need to clean it out really well too. But you may be sore if you get nailed by a catfish. Okay, and this guy, the same guy who was letting the big wasp sting him, he's also got hold of a cane toad. Now, cane toads have big parotoid glands, and they do have a really toxic secretion. There have been pet deaths associated with animals trying to eat a cane toad, and I hope he's wearing glasses when he's doing this. Of course, they can't squirt the poison, but if something grabs them, yeah, this stuff can come out, and it is toxic. Now, the ones that we have here, toads do have the same sort of gland, but our Arkansas toads are only mildly toxic. You would have to handle them pretty roughly. But cane toads, they're in Florida. Boy, Australia's got a real problem with them. They have really big parotoid glands and plenty of poison. Don't kiss the toads. We also have some really neat salamanders. These are newts, and our newts are not terribly toxic. This one right here that's showing the defensive behavior, this was from the Oregon or Washington, yeah, the way out west. It's a rough-skinned newt, but they have a behavior where they show their bright orange underside as kind of a warning. I like this cartoon. Hey, buddy, what part of bright orange? See another warning coloration, and it can make anything that tries to eat them quite sick. They have a really interesting life cycle in which, like frogs, the eggs are laid in water. They hatch into a little larva that turns into a terrestrial eft stage, which is really the most toxic. The skin secretions are pretty seriously toxic. And they go through this stage for a few years, and then they go back to water, and this is the adult stage, which is also toxic but less so, and become aquatic again, lay their eggs in water, and cycle repeats. Interesting animals. I like salamanders. Okay, so we're going to do, everybody freaks out about venomous snakes. 36 species in Arkansas. Only 6 of those 36 are a problem in terms of being venomous. We've only got to learn 6. All the rest of them, no problem. One of the more common mix-ups is between a cottonmouth and a water snake. Now, if you see a snake, get close enough to see his face, his head, and he has these vertical dark bars on the jaws, he's not venomous. This applies for the US, but any of these snakes with vertical lines on their jaws, not venomous. Now, if they don't have those vertical lines, doesn't necessarily mean that they are, but you got a copperhead, you got a cottonmouth, this one's not a problem. But definitely not a problem if they do have lines on the jaws. The vertical lines means non-venomous. Okay, so we're going to do all 6. All you have to do is remember those 6 and you're okay. All right, I'm going from most common, and almost everybody who lives in this part of the country has seen a copperhead. They're not terribly aggressive, but they've got really good camouflage, and sometimes they will not move and get stepped on, and then they bite, and yeah. Usually it's not fatal, but it's still not good. The young ones in a couple of these venomous species will have a caudal lure. Just the tip of the tail is yellow. So that's a good indication that you have a venomous small young snake if it has a yellow tail tip. But all these patterns are typical of a copperhead. Now, the lady that does the game and fish programs call these Hershey's kisses. If you see a Hershey's kiss pattern on a snake, you probably got a copperhead. But this is very typical of a copperhead pattern. About mid-body, you have these roughly triangular Hershey's kisses. Okay, next, in terms of being common in Arkansas, you got cottonmouths. Now, this one is coiled so you can't see his tail, but this is a young cottonmouth. The cottonmouth has a mask. That is a good character. If you get close enough and you can see that mask through the eye, Lori calls it a Zorro mask. If it's wearing a Zorro mask, it's definitely venomous. But yeah, this is a young one, and the young ones usually have the most distinct patterns. So yellowtail tip, distinct pattern, mask through the eye, cottonmouth. They do climb. Sometimes you see them, especially over water, up in a tree. Line through the eye, cottonmouth. And this is typical defensive behavior. This is a typical body shape too. They tend to be kind of fat-bodied, heavy-bodied with a tapering tail. But if they're ticked off, they will gape. They tend to be a little touchy, and if they feel threatened, they'll show the inside of their cotton mouths. They are fish eaters. You see them in the water. You can still see, even from a distance, you get that line through the eye, cottonmouth. This is a close-up. If you see those lines on the mouth, it ain't a cottonmouth. This was a water snake. You're comparing the two. This is your typical, and there are a whole bunch of water snakes that have these lines, totally harmless. I mean, they're bad-tempered. They will bite, but they're not venomous. Okay. And Zorro mask, line through the eye, cottonmouth. They've got kind of a scale right over their eye that makes them look like they're frowning. This is a very typical looking cottonmouth. A little closer, same thing. No bars on the lower jaw, line down the eye, cottonmouth. Bars, uniformly dark, water snake. We have a little rattlesnake. Now the other 3 snakes of the 6 are going to be rattlers. So a pygmy rattler is, I mean, it's serious if you get bit, but this is an adult. It's got itty bitty buttons. When they rattle with something that small, it sounds a little like an insect buzz, but they've got kind of a reddish streak down the back and spots. And they don't get much more than a 1.5 feet, 2 feet would be a big one. They're small. And on the young ones, and you know you've got a young one, a young pygmy, the tail will be yellow, itty bitty rattle. But it's got a little description here too. They're gray, dark spots, reddish stripe down the back, itty bitty rattle. Here's another young one, but they've got a penny for comparison. But these are fairly common. Okay, we also have quite a few timber rattlesnakes. These potentially really dangerous. They get large, they pack a lot of venom. They also have a bit of a mask. Some people call these velvet tails. They've got a dark velvet tail, and a lot of them will have this brown kind of velvety pattern down the back, but chevron shaped markings, dark tail, you got a timber. And they are, we've got quite a few of them here. They're not horribly, they're not super common. I don't think I've ever seen one in this part of the state, but I haven't hunted for them either. Okay, and our last rattlesnake is very uncommon. They're here, but there aren't a lot of them, but they do get big. They pack a punch. The tail is striped instead of solid black, and if you see that, you've got a diamondback. Diamondback rattlers are more common in western U.S., but we do have some here. They're very typical pit vipers. And a large, well-armed snake. And they also have kind of a dark streak. I think this one's actually from a desert area. Okay, and we don't even have to worry about it around here, because if you look at the range map, this is primarily through Louisiana and Texas, and just barely gets into Arkansas. So we have them in the western part of the state, but they're unusual and they hide. They tend to be underground mostly. Most people have heard the rhyme, red and yellow kill a fellow, which only applies in the US. But if the markings, this is kind of dark red, but if the yellow bands meet the red bands, it's a coral snake. The head is kind of blunt, rounded. They give some of the statistics here. They do have a neurotoxic, a really potent, serious venom. They're not as touchy as the rattlers, and they are reclusive. They're more like underground, hidden. But warning coloration, they have several lookalikes. There's a milk snake with similar, but the banding pattern, you've got black and yellow instead of red and yellow. And a scarlet king, a really pretty snake, you've got yellow and black instead of red and black. But the patterning is a kind of mimicry. They're saying, "Oh, I'm armed," but they're not. These are harmless. But if you're local, we don't even have to worry about them because they're western. Okay. We were talking about the alligator farm. So yes, if you want to see alligators in hot springs, you can go to the alligator farm. I haven't been there in years. But Game and Fish does have a season for alligators. And I think there was one, a really big one, taken not too long ago. But yes, the alligators are here in Arkansas. And we have enough of them that there is a hunting season. Okay, most of this stuff, oh yeah, here's the range map. So it runs through here. And we do have some pretty close to us. They're not super plentiful, and I think this photograph was actually taken in Florida. What you don't want to do is, if they've got a sign up like this, don't go swimming. And don't press your luck. Oh, and this is, okay. When we're talking about mammals, this is a really small mammal, but a short-tailed shrew is one of the very unusual venomous mammals. They've got a toxin in their saliva. I mean, it's not really strong enough to hurt anything our size, and it causes paralysis in some of their prey species, which means that they can catch it, store it, eat it later, and it'll still be good. They're just very unusual little mammals. And they're pretty common, you just don't see them very often. They've got a really high metabolic rate and have to eat a lot. Okay, yeah, as far as small furry mammals, the shrew they have really crummy eyesight, but they can make sounds that sort of like a bat and locate what's in front of them. But they've got a little pointy nose, tiny eyes. Yeah, they're carnivorous. Oh, and the unusual thing about the teeth, they've got like an iron addition that helps them keep sharp teeth. But comparatively, we've got voles, we've got mice, we've got moles, but the only one that has venom is a shrew. And here's a little better picture. Little short tail, really pointy snoot, small eyes, an unusual little mammal. Okay, and I've had some discussion about coyotes too. They're doing pretty well almost any part of their range. When they were wolves, the wolves will usually outcompete and kill coyotes. They have kind of a ranking order going on. And some people have claimed that they've seen wolves, and there are coyotes, they just don't get that big. A big one's probably 30-something. Around 30 pounds is a pretty big coyote. We do have fox, and a lot of times when when coyotes move into an area, they'll kill the competition, which would be the foxes. So they have an adversarial relationship between these different dog type species, canids. But the wolves are a little larger, or well, a fair bit larger, and they're a little broader. Coyotes have narrower faces and pointier ears. If you see enough of them, you can tell them apart pretty easily. But yes, we do have coyotes in fair numbers in Arkansas. And they were talking about if you see them, give them plenty of space. Most, I haven't heard of anything that's really that controversial in this part of the country, but some places, a friend of mine who lives in Oklahoma, she said she'd seen, and she lives out kind of along the border, she'd seen coyotes, and then 2 of her cats went missing, and that's what I told her. She should have them indoors anyway, but yeah, she put in a catio. They're opportunistic and will eat almost anything. We got into a discussion too. You don't feed the wildlife. Okay, and we used to be called the bear state. There were lots and lots of black bear in Arkansas at one point in history. But market hunting, they largely killed most of the bears out and were selling them, selling bear grease for their fat. But they were almost gone. I think 1920s. Game and Fish reintroduced some from the north, and they've they've reestablished the population to the point where they have a hunting season for black bear. And a couple of places around here, there have been sightings. I mean, yeah, we've got black bear here. They do come in different colors, and sometimes they've got a blaze on them, but mostly they're dark brown to black. Not really true hibernators. They can be, roused pretty easily. And this is an older Game and Fish statistic, but there have been enough bears that they get complaints of them getting in trash or, just generally making a nuisance of themselves. So they call Game and Fish, and our county, Garland and Saline, pretty good population of bear. Now they are really agile climbers. And obviously, if you know you've got bears around, you want to be really careful about your garbage. And if you've got stuff to get rid of that's stinky, you might want to freeze it and get rid of it, carefully later. But one of the controversies is people who like to feed birds. If you put out a bird feeder, you may attract a lot more than birds. And bears can be just really persistent about a food source, which is what gets them, occasionally gets them killed. But they'll get into hummingbird feeders even. So if you're going to put out feeders, you have to be really creative about putting them where non-birds can't get at them, which is very difficult. Okay. And I kind of like this information about social distancing. So you want to give wildlife, don't crowd them, give them plenty of room. You don't want to get too close. Give them space. Especially the larger ones. And I think this was probably right around Yellowstone someplace. If you get too close trying to take pictures or whatever of a buffalo, good luck. But they've done a lot of programs talking about spreading disease, getting them used to feeding. It's a really risky thing to do. Birds, if you're going to put out a bird feeder, you have to consider that other things may benefit from your generosity. But sometimes the best relationship is a long distance relationship. Give them plenty of room, don't feed them. Okay, and that is my last slide. So, you want to go up here?
Yeah, are you back to the StreamYard tab? Okay, good job, Belinda, good job. Well, we did get a few questions that I got from email, and then there was one or two in the comments live as well. So first of all, I wanted to talk about your scorpion in the shoe story. That's funny because I had a very similar situation last time. Well, a couple years ago when I went camping, I had water shoes on, and when I went to the shower, it was at Lake Washita, and I took the water shoes off in the shower, and a bark scorpion crawled out. So it had been, I'd been walking with it for like a mile from the lake, and I didn't get stung that I noticed, but it just was pressed up against my shoe, and it was alive. Pressed up against my foot in the shoe.
You got lucky.
Yeah. But, well, I guess it was so tight that it didn't have room.
He couldn't cock.
Yeah.
He didn't have enough room to sting you.
So let's see.
Yeah.
We have Joanne, who says, great info. Thanks for watching, Joanne.
Oh, hey.
Linda asks, if I wear cloth gardening gloves to harvest steening nettle, how do I clean the gloves without spreading the steening chemical or getting it on myself?
Okay. Okay. Cloth gloves should work fine. The gardening gloves, you know, how surgeons do it about peeling the cuff back, you know, and turning them wrong side out, and chuck them in water.
Let's see. Got a email question from Patricia. Is there anything you can do to not attract spiders to your home, especially brown recluses?
Oh, if you've got other insects, okay, I'm the world's worst about collecting stuff, and if you don't have a place for them to hide, and I know the guys, the professionals that come in with like little sticky traps, if you put them in dark corners, you can get an idea of how many you have or if you have any at all. But they're basically, I think you can get them at Walmart, the little sticky glue traps. But reducing clutter, if you don't have other insects, you probably won't have brown recluse, but it's hard to totally remove prey items.
Is the old saying true that it's, you know, some of the harmless spiders, not brown recluses, but it's better off to leave them one or two in your house to keep other insects away?
Right.
Or other.
I have no problem with sharing my space with. I was sitting down last night, and there was a little jumping spider, and he was sitting right on the edge of my computer, and I just blew him off. They are just darling. I love jumping spiders. But those are the ones you want to have around. They're really not very aggressive. They're fast hunters. They don't make messy webs. Jumping spiders are the best. I love them.
Question from Susan, and you may have covered this earlier in the program, but she had asked this in advance. What's the difference between poison ivy and poison oak, and how do you treat the rash?
Oh, okay. Poison oak tends to be a little bushier. You'd almost need to get a comparison. I was wondering if I had a comparison in this. Okay, one of my sources is a library book, Venomous Animals and Poisonous Plants, and it's got a lot of good info in it, and it's one of the resources that I used for the program. But poison oak tends to be a little bushier, and the leaves are a little rounder. But it's not nearly as plentiful as poison ivy. What you're mostly going to get is poison ivy. We have pots of that, not so much poison oak.
Donna asked, what's the safest way to get snakes out of my yard without killing them?
Oh, boy. All right. There's an organization called Cold Blood, Warm Hearts. I know Lori, I wish I'd written the number down, but a lady who works for Game and Fish is a member of this organization. They will come out and move snakes. If you think that you just don't want them around, they'll come out and do it for you and take them away. Hey. Now, all those goofy snake repellent things that you can buy, none of them work. None of them. And some people just keep they're paranoid to the point where the lawn is skinned flat. If they don't have any prey, no insects, no rodents, no nothing. If you have a completely bald, naked, sterile area, you won't have snakes, but it'll be awful.
So, AstroTurf.
Yeah.
And by the way, anyone watching this video is recorded, so both on Facebook and YouTube on the library's channels, so you'll be able to share it or rewatch it if you missed some of it. And Belinda, you're welcome to go back after and put in some comments of resources if you have any organizations or numbers you'd like to share.
Yep.
Got another email from Joy. Dear Miss Jonak, let's see, she tuned in and she has a question for you about how to avoid coming in contact with chiggers, otherwise known as the red mites. Prevention from getting bitten. When during the year are they most prevalent? Are they always in grass, weeds, etc.? Or can they get you while walking on sidewalk, for example?
Probably not. Okay, usually ticks and our friendly neighborhood chiggers hang out in brushy, woody areas. So, okay, so I was walking down the greenway, nice, broad, flat area. If you stay out of the shrubbery, you're probably going to be fine. But once you get them, there are, let's see, hydrocortisone creams. There's a bunch of anti-itch creams. One of the herbal ladies was talking about just plantain, jewelweed plantain, like the juice of those particular plants for the herbal people help control itch.
She also mentioned she's from Canada where they didn't have any.
Yeah.
Culture shock, I guess. Yeah, she said she suffered a lot and had an encounter with these perky little devils that you can't even see.
Yeah. Okay. So if you look up, the technical family is trumbiculates, but if you look up velvet mites, they're a larval stage of a velvet mite. The adults are kind of cute, but yeah, they're really irritating. And I've had pretty good luck with some of the repellents. And weirdly enough, it's that muscle rub stuff that has a whole lot of menthol in it. Before I go out and, if I'm weed eating or whatever, I just slather a ton of that. It's like icy hot or, what's that, Bengay, stuff like that. If you slather yourself with that, it seems to help repel them.
While we're on that note, are there any other repellents for other creatures or organisms you recommend?
Okay. I can't think of anything right off the bat. I mean, usually like mosquito spray, I've tried the citronella stuff, which is
Yeah.
And the serious stuff, that you can like spray on your clothes and let it dry. They even sell it if you're really serious about being outside and you're going to get ticks. You might look into the clothing that's been treated with the insect repellent. Pyreth, I think it's one of the pyrethrins. But I know they make the stuff, you can spray it on, let it dry, and it'll last for a while.
Well, I have one more question for you. It's more of I want you to comment on kind of an urban legend. You had talked about alligators and on the map it doesn't have them in Garland County, but you always hear rumors that Lake Hamilton or Washita or Catherine, there's alligators. Is there any truth to that?
It wouldn't surprise me. There was, let's see, a sighting in a pond not too far. I think it was closer to Little Rock. And there's a big one out by Russellville. Somebody's pond has a big gator. I think they've been feeding it, which they shouldn't. Makes me think of that silly movie with Betty White. Oh, good grief.
Lake Placid.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. No, you shouldn't feed the alligators, but it's possible that there may be some in the slow parts of the lakes. Possible.
All right. Well, thank you, Belinda. Before I'll read off a couple other comments, but before I do that, is there anything you would like to say? Any final remarks you'd like to make?
If you want to know more, there are, again, Game and Fish is a good resource. Library books you can check out. Oh man, okay. I'm a member of a whole bunch of Facebook groups. If you're interested in identifying snakes or insects, there are any number of really nice organizations, and if you can give them a good photo, an iNaturalist is another source too. It's something, I don't have a cell phone, but if you've got one of the cell phones that takes pictures and you sign up for iNaturalist, it can tell you pretty close about what you're looking at. And again, those Facebook groups, if you submit a photo to one of those groups, you probably get a pretty good answer pretty quickly.
Excellent. Well, Linda says, excellent presentation. Thanks for watching, Linda. And Sharon says, Belinda, I really enjoyed your presentation. I am at NIT. Is that Naturalist in Training?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. Looking forward for you to do another presentation, which I am too. So we need to talk about that, Belinda.
Okay.
Set up a new presentation. So thanks again, and good to see you. And thanks everyone for watching. And once again, if you have suggestions for other presentations on nature topics, we might have Belinda back or one of her contacts or someone that's an expert in one of these subjects. So if there's anything you would like to learn about, just let us know, and be safe and take care. Good night.
Good night.